why we asked you to attend is the legislature passed, they passed and gave additional money to site 200 additional beds for work release. And so this is in an effort to go ahead and start to site different locations in 4 different counties specific to work release. And so you were asked to be a part of this, to go ahead and help us with the discussion. No decisions have been made as far as where this facility will be sited. That's why you are here, to be a part of that discussion. Help us identify areas, potential locations, and areas where we can site a new location for a work release facility. What does the reentry program look like? How should it look here in Pierce County? What are some of the issues we're going to face here in Pierce County? What are the things that we need to take into consideration in Pierce County? A big piece of this is going to be who else needs to be in the room as well. Who's missing? So as we go through this, think about that. Okay, so to recap, so the purpose, as you see up there, is really to improve public safety by positively changing lives. So the goal is, there's additional money that can be invested in Pierce County. That's what the goal is here, is to identify site locations where we can invest that money and expand beds for work release. And so through this process, we're going to go ahead and cover the release of the expansion project, the timeline. We'll address some of the community concerns. We want you guys to bring those to the forefront. What are some of the concerns? Why DOC is looking here, we'll cover that. What the state work release operations and requirements are. And then through the end of this process, we'll do this for probably 6-7 months. Our goal is to pull a committee together, 15, 20 people that really want to participate and be a part of siting and helping address some of the issues that come up as we go with this. We've got a pretty tight timeline. June of 2020 is when the goal is to have 50 beds sited. That's a pretty aggressive goal. And then the additional 150 by 2021. We understand that that's a pretty aggressive goal, but that's what we're working, that's kind of the timeline. So to fast track that. So with that, I want to introduce Dan.
Can you stay on that slide for just a second?
I sure can. Yeah.
So I'm Danielle Armbruster. I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Reentry Division, and I'm honored to be here with you tonight. Thank you for spending a couple hours of your evening with us. So thank you to the DOC staff and to all of the Pierce County staff and to all of our other community members. I'm honored to be here. I just want to point something out on this slide because this is one of the first groups, public groups, that we have shared our new mission statement with. So we just announced our new DOC mission statement last Thursday. So our old mission statement used to be to improve public safety, and we've just added by positively changing lives. And why that's so important to me and why that should be important to you and to this process is because work release is critical to that. Work release is critical to that transition for helping individuals go back out into the community. And that's our goal. And what's really critical is that the department in Washington State has a reentry division that focuses solely on that. We're one of the few departments in the nation that has a reentry division that's solely focused on transition. With work release, we start with classification at the very beginning of individuals going into our facilities with a Washington 1 assessment, which is a risk assessment, all the way to their transition back out into the community. So I just wanted to point that out to you, that it's really important to us that we're focused on the 97% of the people that are going back out into the community. And for the 3% that are going to stay with us, that we're making sure that they have the best life possible. So my ask of you tonight is, one, to listen to the information that a few of us are going to share, but I also have another ask. Ask us the tough questions, the things that we're not thinking about, the things that the community might need, the things that those individuals are going to need. I also want to mention that I know Tony said that he represents KMB Architects. We have not chosen a space or a building or a facility, so I want to be really clear about that on behalf of the department. If you choose to be a part of this group, you will be a part of that process. You will be a part of that siting process. And so we really hope that you join that commitment and that you join in with us to make those decisions. So this is really just the very beginning of sharing the general information and then going out and working through that process together with the community. So I wanted to be really clear about that. Also, just for emergency purposes, if there was a fire in the fire station, the emergency exit's right behind you. There's coffee and cookies in the back, and the restrooms are right to the left down the hallway. So our communication plan, like I said, this is one of the 4 local advisory committees that we're putting together. And so we have email question boxes for all of you. So for Pierce County, you'd be the 3rd one down. So if you had a question specific that we didn't answer tonight, or something that you think about after you get home tonight, if you can email that box, that way we can keep all questions centrally located, and we're able to get back to you as quickly as possible. So this is the website. So this is live. This is on our doc.law.gov website. This is the work release. So this is specific to this work release project for the 4 locations that we're looking at. And when I say locations, I don't mean a specific site. I mean areas of where we're looking to site. And if you look at number 1, it's where you go to about. And then number 2 is doing business. Number 3 is work release expansion. And then for each county, we have a specific section where questions will be answered, where we'll upload the minutes. So 2 weeks after every meeting, we will upload the minutes from every single meeting when we meet.
So while counties have work release programs, there are some key differences between the county and the state work release programs. State work release is sort of a reentry center going forward. So a lot of what you mentioned in terms of having service or program accessibility is kind of where we want to go with our program. So right now, the way work release works is it is a kind of a step-down reentry center as a part of the continuum of gradual transition from prison back to the community after a felon serves total incarceration. State work release participants are employed by community-based employers and are paid market wages. They go to school or treatment or participate in other approved programming while they're in the work release program. Work release facilities serve as a bridge between life in prison and life in the community. Participants focus on transition to include finding and retaining employment, reconnecting with family members, and becoming productive members of the community. They also learn and refine social and living skills such as riding the bus, going to the grocery store, and managing their personal finances, all while under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections. Work release is an opportunity for self-improvement while assisting participants in creating a safe and productive lifestyle that hopefully can be sustained upon release. So let's talk a little bit about work release placement. Who goes to work release? The people who go to work release are the same people who would otherwise release directly to the community from their prison sentence 6 months later, but without the benefit of the more gradual transition afforded by their assignment to work release. Work release placement is a privilege-based system and is dependent upon following the rules and complying with program requirements. The criteria for work release placement are established in law and agency policy, and we'll provide a 3-ring binder to you at the end of this presentation, so you'll see not only the PowerPoint, we'll provide some of the Washington Administrative Code references so you can see what the rules are and one of the principal work release policies that govern the placement decisions. The criteria for work release, as I said, are established in law and policy. There are multiple layers of review required in approving some persons for work release placement. I think Dan was the one who mentioned earlier that there's a history in Pierce County. And some of us who've been around for a while and experienced some of this have seen that history. And my wife likes to tell me, when we know better, we do better. So hopefully the Department of Corrections has learned some of that over our past historical experiences. And so we're determined to do better with the process. So we've listed there some of the high-level reasons why someone may be ineligible for placement in the work release program. While we don't have time necessarily today to go into them, over the course of the next couple of months, we will certainly take the opportunity to respond to questions and explore some of those detailed decision-making processes. Work release participants progress through a 3-phase step-down program intended to provide graduated levels of access to the community. This gradual community access is based upon the criteria you see listed here. We take this approach in the interest of public safety and to ensure that the person is ready to manage their behavior appropriately with the increased access. Let's talk a little bit about work release expectations. A work release participant's focus must be on reentry. So we monitor every participant to ensure they are strictly adhering to their established program schedule. We charge participants a modest amount for room and board during their stay. They must remain in the facility until and unless there is an approved outing. Every participant in the work release program is subject to drug and alcohol testing. They must also comply with program and behavioral expectations, or they face possible return to total confinement in the prison system. Are there any questions about what I covered there? I know it kind of feels like, for some people, it might be like a 4-H fire hose feeding.
I did have just a question mark on, one of the things on the previous slide, I think, was previous, or maybe a couple slides ago, previous failures
Yes.
in the work release program.
Yes.
How does that, can you just briefly define that? I mean, they've come out, they've gone through the progress house, they've immediately, or at some point, committed another crime.
So if in their criminal history, they've served a total confinement as a convicted felon, and we brought them out through the work release program, and for some reason they failed that, we look at that with what's called a headquarters classification screening committee. So it's a community, it's with community interest in mind. So it's a team of people that it gets into the multiple layers of screening that I talked about.
Sure.
That some cases get screened at a higher level. So we used to have a fairly simplistic approval process for somebody to go into work release. But again, as we learn better, we do better, right? And so we've improved our processes of screening and admitting people to the program over time based on our prior failures and mistakes. One of the things we've learned is that if someone's tried work release before and for various reasons it's unsuitable and it didn't work out, given the time and place and distance and what the factors were, we'll look at that case and we'll say, maybe he's not ready, he or she's not ready. Or maybe there's been sufficient change this time around and passage of time where they really are ready. Let's give them another chance. But that's a higher level of screening and approval process than we would have used in the past. That's led to some of the prior incidents that we've had in the state related to work release.
And I just was touching on that, and Carol and I were talking earlier about our pretrial services that we have in Pierce County. And, you know, one of the things that we're focusing on a bit is people that have been screened for releases before and have not been successful, and then what is the next step when they come up again, and how rigid is that screening process again? I think that would be a concern too with the community is, you know, the folks that tend to come out and repeat failure, you know, there are going to be a few of those, and they fail over and over, and then how do they go back in and or re-screen the next time?
Yeah. So it is kind of a more customized look with a higher level of review on these specific, and I can't use my pointer on this thing that I use at the board because the TV sucks it up. But on these specific issues, there's a higher level screening process that's administered by some subject matter expert at our headquarters level, a separate team of people, and they review it. It's usually a multidisciplinary approach. If the person has a history of mental health issues, we'll have a mental health expert in the room. We'll have a work release manager in the room to talk about the case. We'll present the history as we know it from our database, and then we do go through, we can spend considerable time on these cases before we land a decision. Do we understand the community risk? We understand the community perception. You know, it's about managing risk, right? So we'll either land the case and say, we'll promote you to work release, or you're not ready, or you're not eligible for whatever reason. So it's a pretty thoughtful and deliberate process now. Can't say that it always was.
Sure. No, appreciate it.
Any other questions about any of the ground I covered here? I do want to mention, you see the video camera over here. Our headquarters communications team is recording this for the benefit of the other 3 community advisory meeting venues in the state. So similar to the kind of the limited turnout tonight, we want to expand the group and expand the number of people involved. And one of the risks you run when you do that is you don't want to put everybody through the time warp and given the same information over and over again. So the full unedited tape will likely be posted on our external website, and then we'll have an edited version that at the November meeting, when we have new people in the room, we'll play that as kind of a recap for you if you're able to come again, and hopefully you can, and for newcomers that are not familiar with this material, just to bring people up to speed. So I just wanted to make sure you knew why we were recording this. Any questions? All right. With that, I'll turn it over to Theo, who's the work release administrator, and he'll talk about the role of data and 6157.
A little bit about 6157. So it is true that we're in the home of the fair share laws, Pierce County. So I guess, like I said earlier, my name is Theo Lewis. I'm the state's work release administrator. And one of the things that I do receive calls on and concerns and questions about from legislators, from our own agency, from the public, is about capacity and why, pray tell, can't their son or daughter get into work release. And so in response and looking at our capacity, I worked with our friends at OFM and our capacity managers and came up with looking at the data where we looked at our capacity. So I've got a slide up here, which is our agency scorecard. It's got lots and lots and lots of stats on it. Some of it's about numbers of people, some of it's about violations, but I have it up here because it shows the department is really meticulous at keeping a lot of records, a lot of stats. That being said, just some basic statistics about the department are we have 19,000 people roughly who are in custody in our prison system. We also release about 7,500 people a year. So those are people that come out, they release, they don't stay necessarily in custody for decades, some of them do. But the average stay is quite a bit less. You can see up there that the average for the last year is 23.9 months. That being said, about half of that 7,000 or 7,500 go to supervision. So about 3,500 people move into what you call parole or probation from that system. About an equal number come out of our county courts and go directly to supervision. So that's quite a bit. But the point that I try to make here is that we release 7,500 people from our prisons every year. The current state work release program almost entirely is to service that population. Currently, you heard the secretary say that on the day he actually did that recording, we had about 640, 650 people in work release beds. The current population is 695. We've done a lot of work in the last couple of years to look at our buildings to really maximize space, and so we've pushed the population up to 695 to 741, and by the end of the year, at least 782. That being said, we've outgrown the facilities that we have. If you think about it, the person who goes to work release under the current law is allowed to spend roughly 6 months in work release. The average stay that a person has that goes to this program these days is around 5 months, 5.5 in fact. So in a best case scenario, you get to turn or use each one of those beds 2.5, possibly 3 times a year, which means our capacity for work release is only about 2,000 people a year when we're releasing 7,500. So it shows that there's a hefty need for each area. That being said, when you're looking at where you can have people released to, we mentioned 6157 earlier. So in 2007, there was what I call a landmark bill that affected and directed the work of the state, counties, and cities, and directed us all to work together to make resources available, to raise the prospects for the releasing population, and make sure that services are available to people that release from the prison system back into their communities. Part of that law, and we have an excerpt from it up here, also created a definition for a county of origin, and that's defined by the place where a person's first felony conviction occurred. So the department is required to and complies with the requirement to release people back to their communities. That being said, and Dave, you're correct that this is an area that's very well versed on the county of origin issue. So there are also 4 exceptions which are allowable under law, and that's a court order, some documented, not just I think so. In fact, there are negative influences in the area, the presence of support like a family or a family member that's going to receive them, and victim issues. So say there's a famous victim. This kind of goes along with the heinous crimes that we had noted earlier. So, too small for you guys to see, but in the package that we have, there are some specific handouts that show just basic. It's actually quite detailed, but these are the intakes and the releases per county. So these are the numbers for last year, the number of cases that were sentenced to prison out of certain counties, and the people that released from prison back into those counties. So you'll be able to see in there that you've got ebb and flow, and having spoken about this and presented it a number of times, you'll see that it's pretty close in most cases, and interestingly in Pierce County, for admissions and releases, there's actually a negative variance.
Theo,
Yes?
do it one more time.
Oh, nice, Dan. So Dan got us a blow-up. That's new. But so that being said, when we're looking at expanding the size of the program, we look to data to inform us on where we should focus and where the need was. So we had a look here, and the 4 places that had a pretty big need, and it's not the differential, it's just the sheer amount of people that are going to those counties and the size of the facilities that we have there. So even though we have a pretty good sized work release in Pierce County, for instance, the Progress House Association leases a building from Pierce County, which you guys all saw when you came down Highway 16 up on the right-hand side. It's smaller than the need is for the county. That's just the fact of the matter. They've done a lot of work on the facility. We've helped them extensively in equipment and support in trying to get that facility so that it can meet the needs, but it's just simply too small. Additionally, Pierce County is a big county, so you got one location that's kind of up in the northwest corner of the city, and it's in any case, I think you get my point that it's a bit small and it's a bit limited. So you got your locations. So we chose 4 main locations for our expansion. These are areas that we want to explore, see what's out there. We know that there are some facilities that exist that have been closed down, but that was the direction that we used. It ends up being, not surprisingly, the core west side area. You'll see on the map there that the blue or the black dots are the locations of existing facilities, and the areas that are shaded are areas where there's either no service, in the case of Snohomish County and Chelan County, and major population centers with no services. And then in King and Pierce County, there's just so many people that release to the areas, and the facilities that we have 3 of them up in King, and even there, the need outstrips the availability. So, like I said, these counties were based on a definition of being underserved or unserved, and so we're focusing our efforts and looking in these areas. As I noted earlier, there's demand. So at any given time, the number fluctuates up some months, down some months, but not by much. But there's, at any given time, roughly 1,200 people male, roughly 200 people female that are in our prison facilities who have applied for work release, people who have been accepted into the work release program and are waiting for a bed. Unfortunately, a lot of those sentences will expire, and those people will release still waiting for a bed. It's a difficult situation where the inmates have behaved themselves, they've earned the right, but we just don't have a bed for them. That being said, that number is also an underrepresentation because with the county of origin requirements and the fact that, of course, most people want to return home anyway, you may have people that, if I just backed up a sec here, are required to go to Snohomish, or they're required to go to Chelan, or they're required to go to these other places who haven't even applied, so they're not going to be reflected in that number. Anecdotally, as of this afternoon, there are roughly 300 people who have requested and been accepted to use the Progress House work release in Pierce County. we're waiting for that. So it's substantial. Okay, so if you have any basic questions for me, I know that there's a couple of topics of discussion from our friends from Pierce County here, but you might want to ask.
I'm just not, no, go ahead.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What actual effect on recidivism have we seen from the work release programs that are in place versus just release?
It's good. We have good statistics on it, and I can produce the actual stats rather than just talk off of memory. But you're looking at a difference of 8 and 12%. So it's substantial. And it may seem small, but when you're talking about statistics and criminal justice, that's pretty huge. Also, I wanted to note for the Progress House work release here in Pierce County that the Progress House Association, the department, and the prosecutor's office, in fact, have an agreement, a citing agreement, and an entrance agreement that defines the criteria for that location. And of course, it lines up with and matches the County of Oregon concerns. It also has a couple of other wrinkles to it that I can provide.
So I am not Nanette Graham. It's Carrie Nanette Graham is my supervisor. She's director of capital planning and development. Excuse me. What capital planning and development does is we build, basically. When the expansion happens, we're the division of the Department of Corrections that steps in and does the building. What we have a few storyboards around here to kind of look at. There's 2 over here that have building components. There's 2 here that have timelines. There's the current work release facilities. If anybody's curious, this is what they look like around the states that we have. And this is the last one we built. And it has a footprint kind of showing the outline of the facility itself. What the facility has, if you look at our building components, obviously we have an admin area, program, day room. It is a controlled access, but it's not a prison. It's not locked down like a prison, but it does have a controlled access. You've got a lobby. You have areas for services, which is important because everybody's talking about chemical dependency or whatever services are provided at work release, or if they go out to the community for those services. Areas for people to come visit. And you can see on the other side, it says controlled building access. Street presence, clean, organized, safe sleeping space, supervised lobby, day room. Administrative, we do have kitchens, obviously we feed them, laundry services, and transportation equipment that Theo just talked about out here at our Port Orchard release, work release. This is the projected timeline. If you look on here, it says that we're hoping to be in by this date. It's a very aggressive timeline. It's going to be very, very hard to meet. We've got to get through this part, which is what we're doing now. Hopefully, with the help from you guys, we can help site a place in whatever county that ends up being chosen, I should say. And then that's where we all go out and look. And they will be broken down. This committee would probably come up with, and the story's been probably the top 3. The top 3 would come back to Department of Corrections, and we would look at those top 3 and then make a choice from there. Anything else that I've missed that the committee thinks they want me to cover?
So we have actually 2. So the legislation, the way it was set forth, established that we would cite 50 beds by next June, end of June of 2020, and another 150 beds by June of 2021. Now, when Theo worked so diligently to help in submitting that decision package that the legislature approved, we knew then what we knew. And we did not anticipate that we would have such a robust community engagement process that would take us down this pathway, right? So we had that conversation and we said, while the law says, and we believe, that work release is an essential public service, the public doesn't see it that way. And so we need to engage people in the conversation, and they need to see that, again, when you know better, you do better. And we have a much better understanding of the dynamics and our role as a community partner in Pierce County. So, as Mike so articulately pointed out at the beginning of the process, we want to get to a point of mutual understanding, and we want to be asked the hard questions. We want to provide the data. We want to engage people where they're at with their concerns, and hopefully we can mitigate the concerns or explain them to people's satisfaction so that they understand where we're coming from. But I just want to touch on, so this legislation provides funding for the location and state staffing for 200 beds. Some of us see this as the beginning of an expanded reentry opportunity for the population. So when you talked about, Dan, some of the other underserved counties, we start where we think we may have a good conversation with the community based upon our willingness to engage, and then we expand. And we go back to the legislature and we say, you know, we've had good experiences where we've engaged the community. They understand this is about reentry now, and everybody has a different understanding of what reentry is now as opposed to what it was 20 or 30 years ago. And so now maybe we engage those successes to leverage other successes in other places in the state. In some cases, it's simply a matter of efficiency of scale. We go where we've had some success and where the population and the releases have taken us because that's where the convictions have taken place. So this is kind of the beginning of the conversation. We need to prove that we have a viable concept with the community engagement piece, especially that outreach piece, and that we intend to fully engage people all along the trials and tribulations with GAR and KMB in helping us to flesh out the expectations around not just the brick and mortar design, but what are the program specifications? What happens when they're in the building, in addition to what they do when they go out in the community on a point-to-point pass with permission. So there's the very aggressive timeline for 50 beds, the still aggressive, but perhaps more realistic timeline of 150 beds. And there are all these requirements. There's the RFP, which at meeting 2, next month's conversation, we'll share that. We'll talk more specifically about that. We'll talk a little bit more design, land use approval, all of the technical aspects that unfortunately go with the brick and mortar requirements. If you find a spot, it may be the ideal spot, except for, oh, there's a showstopper, can't go there. What are our other options? So we intend to take this journey with you and others who we bring into the room as community advisory board members and go through it together, because in the end we want you to share in ownership of that operation and helping to shape what it looks like in the end. So,
ma'am, did you have a question?
I'm just noticing that this looks like new construction, so not an expansion of an existing facility like Progress House.
So this would never be new construction. My friends from KMB and GAR would slap me in the head if I said, let's do 50 new beds. That will never happen.
In 6 months.
I guess that the word,
And even this is a
that
very
was what I was
aggressive
getting at.
timeline
Yeah.
for new construction. So Theo can tell you, Theo likes to say, well, we could cite a work release in a closet. I don't want to go there. But the requirements for the program, if you go back and you look at what the program requirements are, these are the requirements for what the program looks like. The physical space where it lives, we can work with just about any existing location. So commonly, a motel, an old motel that's fallen into disuse or ill repair, medical clinic. There are a lot of locations which are viable, and at that point, if we find a location that, it's on a transportation route, the community is open to it, there are other attractive factors about it, we might be able to engage people in order to achieve this timeline, then we'll ask our friends from KMB to look at it from a technical standpoint. Does it require land use approval? I have no idea what that means, but they'll educate us all together at the same time. Can we do the design in that existing framework, on that footprint? And so one of the reasons for having you here with us is you know the locations in the community. You know the existing buildings. And we've had some success in going into a building in an area which was perceived to be kind of a blighted area. And we bring an improvement to the building and we bring a profile that helps elevate the presence in the community in terms of not only our state staff, but law enforcement and others. And so one of the things we'll do on our journey potentially is if you ask us to engage local law enforcement and what are the crime statistics for certain areas, we'll bring that data, or we'll ask you to bring that data into the room and share it. If you ask us what are our experiences in our other 12 work releases around the state where we already have existing services, we can get the data for those neighborhoods. We can get our partners in law enforcement to come and share their stories about their experiences there. I'm sure Tacoma PD would be happy to talk about Progress House. Did that answer your question?
It did, especially about the 50 beds. I was just thinking that the zoning issue is less controversial if you're expanding where there's already a facility, because the neighborhood around there is accustomed to having that use. And so if you were to cite somewhere that has never before had a work release, you need some more time for community engagement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you'll have a little more work to do perhaps to get the community ready for that use.
Agreed. So expansion of an existing location is an option. Siting in an existing structure that could be retrofitted for the purposes of housing the program is an option. And as I said, the 200 beds is merely the beginning, because the way criminal sentencing is moving forward, the type of people that are being sentenced are the type of people who would be very suitable for work release placement. So that's a custody level at which we think it would be appropriate to expand our capacity in the department, rather than holding them back in total confinement. Theo talked about the people who are eligible, who have applied, but we can't get to their name on the list because we don't have the capacity. So creating capacity for people who've earned the privilege, they've demonstrated, I've done the programming, I've behaved myself, I'm ready, I want to go back home to Pierce County where I was sentenced, and my family's there, and I want to regenerate my roots back there. Help me get there. I think you can help us make the case with the community that we provided a service, and whereas people would ordinarily 6 months later land on a community corrections officer caseload without that benefit of a progressive kind of a glide path toward reentry, we put them in work release, and then we transition them from there to community supervision if they're required to have community supervision in Pierce County. So as Gar pointed out, we have a poster board up here. These are some of the existing work release configurations. So when you look at them from the street, if you didn't know it was a work release, you might not know it was a work release. No razor wire, no bars, no locked door. There's Olympia. Tri-Cities, which I think is our only new construction work release that was built in Tri-Cities 20 years ago. So that's our most recent from the ground up work release project. Yeah, Dan.
I'm sorry, we were just talking about one of the places.
Sidebar, sorry.
Is he feeding you questions over there?
I did have a question though, Mark. That 50 beds by June, let's say, that everything stays how it is on paper and it's these 4 counties. Would that be 50 beds dispersed, or what if some county said, hey, we're ready to take 50 right now, would that fill?
So we are open to wherever that we can meet the need to provide the service, and the community is welcoming. So if Snohomish County said, hey, we'll give you 200 beds and we'll make it lickety-split, and we can do 200 beds by June 30th of 2021, we would certainly be open to that part of the conversation.
And is that actually people filling the facility by June?
Yes.
Just it identified and up and...
The expectation is that we would occupy and be in operation by the end of June 2021. So it is an aggressive timeline, right? But there again is a different understanding of how we're approaching this than when we first submitted the decision packet. So, we're pretty insistent. We need this part of the process, because in Pierce County, better than anybody that somebody can come in and poison the well. Despite everybody's good conversation, it's possible for somebody to say, no, you're not doing it here. And turn what is otherwise goodwill on the part of the majority of the community into a you're not welcome here kind of conversation. So we're fully invested in this part of the dialogue, and if we can demonstrate to OFM and to the governor's office and the legislature that we are committed and we're making progress, I think we can get some potential grace on this 50 beds. And we can say, we're making progress in all 4 areas, it looks like it's viable, we're working 3 or 4 different options. We may get them to carry that 50 bed intent over to make it 200 in the biennium. So, but right now we're kind of pointing toward the 50 beds by the end of next June. Other questions before I turn it back to Mike?